Hi, everybody. Welcome back to NCSA's webinar series. I'm Jill Escher. I'm the president of NCSA, and I am the moderator of what promises to be a very interesting, very topical webinar on, I think, an issue all of us who are working with or helping people with severe and profound autism, something we encounter constantly in our quest for appropriate supports and services, which is the issue of discrimination against our population. So we have two guests this evening. First, we have Jackie Ceonzo, who is the executive director and founder of SNAC in New York City. She's the mother of an almost 29-year-old son with profound autism. And she is really a force of nature. She has put together recreational and other programs right there in the heart of New York City, serving, some of the most challenging clients in the business. So amazing woman. We had her on our podcast last year. Strongly, highly recommend that podcast for those of you who want to learn more about Jackie. We also have Ashley Kim, who is the executive director of Together for Choice, which is a national disability rights advocacy organization. And they work on housing and day programs, and they, as their name tells you, Together for Choice, their philosophy is that we need the full continuum of care to serve the wide variety of needs. And of course, NCSA is in full agreement with that position. We are very bi-coastal. Ashley's coming to us from LA. Jackie's coming to us from New York. With that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Jackie, if you would share your slides, and we will get this webinar started.
And here's where I panic after that glowing endorsement, and I don't know how to share a screen.
Oh, and I finally got chat to work. Sorry, it didn't work for the other webinars, but chat is working. And please, however, when you have your questions for the panelists, please put it into Q&A and not chat, because it's a little easier for me to moderate that, but feel free to use chat.
Okay, is it up?
It is up. You're
Okay,
good.
so I'm Jackie, as Jill said, and speaking of a force of nature, Jill's hot stuff, and I've spent the last few weeks getting to know Ashley, so you're going to be really impressed with what she has to say. So I started SNAC. I used to be able to tell you what the acronym stands for, but now you're not allowed to talk about special needs or lots of certain things, so we just call it SNAC. The reason I started SNAC is my son Joe, when he was about 8 years old, I realized he didn't have a lot to do other than go to therapy. Joe was diagnosed with a pretty severe intractable seizure disorder at about 14 months old. And then we came to learn that he was on the spectrum. So he had really not too many places that could handle his significant needs, not being verbal. When I met Ashley said, well, what does that mean? What does it mean, the significant needs? Well, he wasn't verbal. He could have, clusters of seizures at any given time. Toilet training, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, didn't come easy or early, and it's still not that great. And I tried to take him to a special needs program, and we were turned away. All of a sudden, they didn't have any openings. So that was pretty eye-opening. And at that moment, I realized autism and special needs are not synonymous. And I don't know if there's ever going to be a place that's going to be able to help him. I knew how difficult finding a school was. So, lo and behold, we went to the first Autism Speaks. I think at the time, this could have been Walk Far for NAR. This is how early this was, because Joe was born in 95, which is the top of this autism explosion that we're all living through. So this was a profound day for me as well. We're all at this walk, and all of a sudden, that the crowd starts to murmur, and something's wrong, and a young child was missing. And all the moms went right to the lake, and that's exactly where we found the young boy. We got him out and we saved him, but it's a very overwhelming, overpowering day, because I didn't realize the scope of how large this epidemic was until that day. So again, fast forward, now I have Andrew. That's Andrew there. He'll be so thrilled I shared this picture. He's 4 years younger than Joe. And when Andrew started school, he had such a full dance card. He was going to birthday parties and this and that. And I realized Joe doesn't do anything, nothing but go to occupational therapy. And I know he's a hot ticket. He's got a lot of things we have to take care of, but for God's sakes, he's still a kid. So we started a program where both of them could go, because I did have 2 kids and it was hard enough getting Joe anywhere. And then what was I going to do with Andrew? So, and that was the birth of Snack. What do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention. This is what we needed. And lo and behold, so did many, many other families. There was no place for, and I'm sorry to say, there still aren't very many places that take folks like Joe and like the rest of the kids that we serve at Snack. So all the things that everybody does, cooking classes, going on trips, art class, all the things that kids do in a childhood, it just needed to be adapted and designed so Joe could succeed. And certainly if Joe can succeed, then so can, anybody else. So that was wasn't really such a brainchild. It's just, I did it, because we had to. So I also came up with snacktivities. That's one of my words that I invented, which is activities adapted for kids that need a lot of support. So we've got a few things that make us snack. One-to-one, that's something you're not going to find most places. It's expensive to run. If you look at the pool, in order for our kids to succeed, we need to have a low ratio for our guys. They need to have sometimes one-to-one. Sometimes we have 2 staff with 1 person. It's about person-centered planning and what do you need to succeed and to be able to participate. And sometimes just getting through whatever the class is without having some sort of maladaptive situation is a success. So that's what Snack is about. Oh, this is the video that doesn't work, so I'm going to skip it. I tried that in my... Now we move on. So I thought it was so hard when Joe was in school and under 21. And then as he got older, puberty is, dastardly. Behaviors ramp up, not just for Joe, but for all the kids. And I realized, so there isn't going to be anything when he's 21 either, is there? So we decided to increase the programming to age up with our kids. So at 18, we started helping, 16, 18, we started helping the kids start coming to program classes from school during the week, because transition means it doesn't happen that the day you're 21, your whole life changes. You don't go to the school you've been going to forever. And now you're in some place with all new people that you've never met before. So in the true sense of transition, we started early, and we suggest everybody come early and, get to know what's going on and see what works for you. And, why would you get a job, volunteer, intern opportunity close to your school when that ends, you're not going to be there anymore. So we tried to be, forward thinking about things, and we developed these really terrific classes. And this picture is right here on 53rd Street between 1st and 2nd Avenue. We have a backyard, which, was so fortuitous for the pandemic, because we ran a vaccine clinic out there, because as most of you probably experienced, trying to get vaccinated with a profoundly autistic person was really not easy. So we had a clinic here at Snack, which, for many of us was life-saving. I don't know why, we have to think of all these things, but unfortunately that's the way it is. So this is another class that we've developed as the guys have gotten older. So anything, of course, we have for the older guys, we have for the younger guys, but this is Joe in his own apartment. You can see the cabinets all have pictures. Joe doesn't do well with the Mayor Johnson symbols. He's so literal. It has to be an actual picture of whatever it is, and he's not alone. So that really makes it easier, and it really helps the staff to make sure the things go in the right spots. So this is him in his apartment. He has a cooking class. He cooks for all of his buddies on Wednesday nights, which is tonight. Employment. Now, Jill and I have had this conversation about, employment. Okay, so we're talking about profoundly impaired folks. Is really a job the first thing on my list? probably not. It's because we're looking for something to do that's appropriate and to have a productive activity. But it's not that easy to find. Most people don't really want to hire Joe. We're very fortunate in New York that we've got all these great learning institutions, and Columbia University has become a partner to us. In addition to helping us with staffing and teachers and things like that, they've been hiring our 21 plus folks and giving them jobs in the dining hall. So this is Joe. I use Joe because I don't like to use a lot of the other kids if we don't have to. On his first day at Columbia, he's cleaning tables at the dining hall with all the people that are his age. So that's hence the red and green bucket. So it's Joe knows which way to go. Lots of visual cues for our guy here. There he is, which, I never thought Joe would get into the Ivy Leagues before his brother, but there you go. And then we started an e-commerce site, which we have coffee and things we sell. And we do this at Snack to train everybody in our very welcoming, very controlled, but not really controlled that it's a fake office. It's a real office. We have a real setup. So these guys can learn how to work. And the skills, range from, there's one kid that could run the whole place by himself, to Joe who can label the coffee and shred and what have you. I with all that goes on and us, the sheltered workshops being closed and what have you, that kind of left us out. So we've developed this in hopes that we'll be able to hire these guys. They're a tough workforce, I'll just say. So this is, we have a coffee business, Cup of Joe, very original, t-shirts. So the kids can do this. We pull the orders offline and the guys can ship. They walk to the post office, talk about being integrated in the community. All the guys wear these snack shirts. So everybody knows us. It's really right here in the middle of Manhattan with all the crap that's going on. We're doing great stuff and everybody in the neighborhood knows us. So don't believe everything you hear about New York. We're doing okay. In this whole world of what are we going to do with these guys, obviously housing is a situation. I've pretty much got the day piece figured out. There's classes, there's work. We've got a great recreational center run by the Parks Department. Everybody here's a member. The kids go and swim there. They swim at our class. They're very entrenched in the community, so it's great. But where in the heck is everybody going to live? So I got tapped to help with a project here in New York. Jill, at some point you're gonna have to give me a time thing if I'm going too long. You'll come back on, right?
Yeah, you're fine. Keep
okay.
going. You're fine.
Okay. The church has a lot of property here in New York. So ArchCare is a division of the Archdiocese of New York. And I think this is probably nationwide. The church and Verizon own like most of the property in every city. We were trying to take some property and reimagine it to fit our population. So of course I'm on the committee. I was hoping for a situation where it could be for those with complex needs. And then, I took a breath and realized, the guys with not complex needs, have support needs, but not tremendous, they need help too. So that's the way this project started. It's a convent that's been renovated to 10 apartments. It's all self-directed funding through Medicaid. But, Ashley and I had this conversation. The whole building can't be folks with autism because of the settings rule, which is dumb. I'm just going to say it. It is. So it's got 8 of the 10, and then we have to try to find somebody because you can imagine how many people are just lining up to move into this building with these guys. But it's working. I mean, look at this place. The church they paid for the renovations and they're taking the stinking housing subsidy for the rent. And look at these guys. These are all folks that would have not moved out for a lot of reasons, but they were so comfortable in this place. Of course, the pandemic hit right as they moved in. So that's probably why you haven't heard a lot about it. But you will, because they're really starting to roll it out. Our ribbon cutting, everything got delayed, but it's one of the things I'm proudest about being involved with, because these guys are so happy. They were there during the pandemic and they all stayed and nobody got sick. They didn't all have to go home. It's just an amazing thing. And they're doing another one up in Eastchester, New York. Look at this convent that they're renovating. I mean, should be happening all over the country. Again, we're being tormented by the state. Well, you can't have too many people. For God's sakes, the list for people that need housing is tremendous. Why would you get in our way? Why would you get in our way? But so be it. We're fighting. Hopefully, Ashley's going to help us figure this out. So in that vein, a year ago or so, with all of this pushback, this discrimination, that's what we're talking about tonight, from folks with complex needs. A few of us advocates here in New York started a coalition for self-direction. We wanted to call it "Get Out of Our Way." Don't tell us how to spend the money, because that's not what self-direction means, but we came up with the coalition for self-direction. We have retained a government relations specialist, I guess, because the kids never seem to have one of those. The agencies all seem to. And if you're interested, you can sign up to be on our mailing list. We are in our infancy, but this is what our hope is to get rid of all the nonsense and the rules, and to end the discrimination, and working with people like Jill and people like Ashley, make this ridiculousness go away, and make life, for those of us who have these guys with real complex needs, because life's hard enough. We shouldn't have to be fighting ridiculous, non-common sense rules for housing, for employment, for programming, for classes. It just doesn't make sense. So that's what the coalition is all about. And then what is next? The end. So how'd I do? Did I beat the clock?
Yes, you beat the clock. I do have a couple questions though before we go to Ashley.
Okay, I'm gonna
Okay.
stop sharing.
Um,
Doesn't matter.
it's okay. Leave it on for
Okay.
now. So when we talked, you were talking about how New York State imposed rules on you with regards to use, for example, of self-directed funds
Mhm.
that weren't being imposed on other programs. I don't remember the specifics.
I'll tell you.
Okay.
So in the way the budget works, the kids get a Medicaid budget, and it's an algorithm that spits out however much it's worth. However much it's worth, there's one category called IDGS, individualized services and supports, goods and services, something like that, governmental speak. It's capped at $32,000, and in that category, it's classes like that SNAC offers. They're called community classes. There's some other things, coaching, camp, those types of things. And since 2014, SNAC is 20 years old, so we precede self-direction. We've never taken any government funding. We've always been a private pay. We fundraise for half of our budget, and we try to charge, as what any typical kid would pay for a swim class or what have you, even though it costs us 50,000 times more to do it. So these classes, since the inception in 2014, SNAC became reimbursable under this IDGS category. Fantastic. Last year, all of a sudden, I'm getting calls from parents. My fiscal intermediary won't pay for classes at SNAC. They say that you're mimicking a day hab, that it's only special needs people. There's guidance that we clearly have met for 10 years, and now all of a sudden, OPWDD is the Office of People with Developmental Disabilities here in New York. They had a meeting with all the fiscal intermediaries, advising them of these red flags. So it's not an actual change of the guidance. It's the whisperings of, is that really open to the public? Certainly we are. And this, lo and behold, this whole nonsensical torment of families began about it. Because again, we don't have enough to do. We have to now,
Right.
go through a 22-page dossier for every class of why it meets the guidance. So that's another big thing that the Coalition for Self-Direction is working on. We're advocating, we're trying to be nice, but it's a little contentious. We're making some headway, but that's what happened. And that's just part of, again, the Arch Care Project. Wouldn't you think that the state would say, thank you, Archdiocese of New York, for making your property available and renovating it so that we can get 10, 20, 35 people off the 19,000 waiting list page. No, you can't put more than 8 people in there. You can't do this. You can't do that. Nonsense. So does that
It's
answer you?
yes. Yes. I mean, it is complete arbitrary and capricious behavior on the part of our bureaucrats that is
Indeed.
untethered to the obviously the realities of the wait lists and the needs, but also untethered to operational realities. You know, it's unbelievable. Okay,
It
somebody
sure
asked,
is.
how are you funded? I believe Kathy is asking about your day program, and you just
So it's
told
community
them that,
classes. It's not a day program
okay, I'm
because
sorry,
that's where they
community
say I'm
classes, right,
duplicating,
right. But it sounds like it's private pay, but you also highly subsidize through your fundraising.
we do.
So it's not
The
HCBS waiver funded.
Well, like I say, there are these community classes. The way
Mhm.
they're set up happens to fit in the guidelines. I created the classes before the guidelines, but I fit because I know what I want from my boy. It's like my other boy. It's like if I was going to go to New York Sports Club, if Joey could go to any of these places, but he can't. So we create those classes. Just the environment is such that it's small groups and people can participate. But there's plenty of people that want to come to snack. People who need, just like, when you go to a yoga class and I'm usually the one that the teacher always has to spend time with, that's what snack's like. We're
Yeah.
very person-centered. So yes, the classes cost whatever a typical class costs. Parents pay, and then they get reimbursed up to this $32,000 cap. But
Mhm.
again, you know, every person that comes to snack is on a scholarship because I have to fundraise the other half. If I'm charging you $75 for a class, it costs me probably 350. So we fundraise for that gap. And, that's the way we do it. And
Mhm.
it works. It can work because people believe in what we're doing. And
Mhm.
you know what? It's better than when I first started, I tried to be funded by the state. And they said to me, Jackie, you want to give everybody a Cadillac. We can only give everybody a Chevy. And I said, well, you know what? Your kid can get a Chevy. I'm giving a Cadillac to all the kids and I'm going to figure out how to pay for it. And that's what we've done. It's not been easy.
Mhm.
It's not been easy at all, but it's what
Mhm.
should be. And I feel we've
Should be.
set the bar for excellence.
Absolutely. Okay, another question. Do the clients have aides to help them with their jobs?
Yes, the way the self-direction budget works, which is the really good piece of it, that's complicated, but not that complicated. There's community habilitation, there's respite. You can hire people under the appropriate category or a job coach, we call it SEMP. And yes, and the state will pay them. The agency becomes the employer of record. So many of the kids at snack, and especially in the city right now, public transportation is not at our best. So everybody kind of needs to be escorted places just for the way it is. Most of our folks are not travel trained. We're hoping for that always. So yes, they do come with staff. That we welcome that. You cannot come with staff. We are truly self-directed. What do you want? When do you want to come? There's no minimum. You don't have to come 5 times. You can come for half hour. If you can't eat peanuts, we adhere to everything. We try to be what anybody else would want for their family.
Very good. Another question, do you get grant funding? Um,
We do.
any
We're a
advice about getting?
501(c)(3) and
Mhm.
we apply for grants. I wish we had more of them. We have some really terrific funders, but the funding, another reason I don't take money from the government is the requirements. Then they get in your business and they start telling you, well, you can't pay them that and you can't do this. So we have tremendous funders who really understand our mission and support us. So yes, we do. And we're always looking for more funders if anybody wants to introduce us to anyone. But yes, we fundraise, well, so our budget's like close to $2 million, I guess, at this point. $1 million of it we fundraise. And about half of that is grants and the other half is all those super chicken dinners you want to go to.
Got it. Okay, great. Let's turn it over to Ashley again. People, if you have questions, Q&A instead of the chat, well, again, feel free to use chat. but for questions, Q&A. Ashley, let us unmute you and let us, oh, I'm going to stop your slides. Can you
Oh,
stop
I
sharing
did
your
do it.
slides?
Yep, I did.
Yep.
Sorry.
And then
Yep.
we will get
Okay.
Ashley's video and her slides up.
All right, let me just do this. You good?
Very good.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. It's nice to meet everyone here. It's kind of interesting. I feel like I'm talking to myself, but I'll do my best in sharing what I put together today. So thank you so much for having me. So last week, Jill shared this graph of autism growth rate in the state of California. And it prompted me to go back to my, charts and kind of look at the total number of DDS consumers in our state. And what I found was that we serve over 430,000 individuals who are now in the system, and approximately more than 55% of them are adults over the age of 18, and about 41% of them have autism.
Actually, it's now more than 50%.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, with as of December 2023, we passed that threshold. So more than 50% of the active caseload are autism cases, which is amazing because it was like 4%,
Yeah.
just, not too long ago. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So the point is that, we have more than half of these individuals are adults over the age of 18, and we still have a huge need to meet their housing needs and long-term care needs. So this is the solution, right? So how do we come up with more affordable disability housing options and quality long-term care options that are just beyond housing? So imagine this kind of village on 4.6-acre parcel of land with 12 homes and 2 studio apartments with 7,000 square foot community center, garden, recreational, and sports areas. This is pretty much an ideal place for individuals with autism or other developmental disabilities, right? I mean, we would love to have something like this for our population. Well, this is a passion project for Christian Bale, a Hollywood actor who wanted to address the need for a foster care community. And to support his passion, the Los Angeles County supervisor, Catherine Barker, actually came out to participate in the groundbreaking ceremony and gave the organization $1.2 million to start up the construction. So this is something that we should all celebrate because there is a huge need for foster care community, as well as autism community. But what if this was actually built for individuals with autism and not foster children? What would be the reaction of the bureaucrats in our state or other states? They would actually call this a modern day Willowbrook, right? I mean, this is all the time we hear this. If you're building something for people with in the foster care system, it's a village. But if it's for people with autism or other disabilities, then it's Willowbrook. Consider this example with Toll Brothers. They posted this a couple of years ago, actually. They're marketing this community for 55 plus active adult singles, adults with all these resort style amenities. And this is celebrated. But if we actually build this specifically for individuals with autism, then it's considered a segregated institution. So this is another real life example. This is an affordable senior housing funded by HUD Section 202 funding, which is for supportive housing for the elderly. It's 100% for seniors, 78 affordable units, which means that people are only paying 30% of their income as rent. And this is right in the heart of Los Angeles. But if this was actually for people with autism and other developmental disabilities, not for seniors. So if this was for disability adults, and funded by HUD Section 811, supportive housing for persons with disabilities, only 19 out of 78 units with disabilities would be allowed in this building, which means the 20th applicant and thereafter with disabilities will not be accepted due to their disability, which is a clear violation of fair housing. So HUD Section 202, 100% yes for seniors, but HUD Section 811, no more than 25% for people with disabilities. How is this even enforceable, and how is this even legal? So another example in the state of California is that the use of home and community-based services waiver, 1915C, for seniors versus people with disabilities. So there is actually a regulation that basically prohibits regional centers to pay for services in a setting that has more than 16 or more beds in a licensed care facility, but not for seniors, right? So what does this mean? For seniors who can live in residential care facilities for the elderly, they can use their assisted living waiver. And there's no limit on how many seniors can live there using that waiver. But on the other hand, for people with disabilities, adult residential care facilities, they can only accept people with disabilities up to 15 if they want to use the HBS waiver funding. So this is a clear violation of people's rights, right? So in the name of integration, Olmstead, and HCBS settings rule, people with autism and IDD can't have nice things. That's pretty much what they're saying, even though that's not what they're telling us. By the policy, that's what we are facing at this point. So let me give you another example. In the Pennsylvania, my favorite state that I love to talk about, Pennsylvania has like one of the most crazy restrictions in the country. So you cannot use HBS funding for individuals living in farmsteads, intentional communities, or any campus settings. No residential services can be adjacent to one another. No day services can be adjacent to one another. No human services can be adjacent to one another. You cannot receive HCBS services in an apartment complex, condominium, or townhouse that has more than 25% of IDD units, even if you don't use 811 funding, even if you use 100% private funding to build housing, if there are people occupying more than 25% that are disabled, then people cannot receive HCBS services. And you cannot have more than 3 community program participants at a given time and given location. And you cannot have more than 4 residents in a home, and you cannot have more than 25 individuals in a service location at any given time. I can't think of any population that are restricted more than people with IDD in the state of Pennsylvania. So for example, the ARC Jacksonville Village, which is an affordable rental housing community for 121 residents, most of which are adults with IDD. Bittersweet Farms, which is a first autism farmstead community supporting individuals with high behavioral needs. Camp Hill communities, which are really nice farmstead communities across the country and across the world. Misericordia, which serves 600 residents and day and weekend participants, including intermediate care facilities and small group homes and hospice care with a lot of great day program employment options. All of those options are not allowed for funding in the state of Pennsylvania. So it's not just housing that we are we are dealing with. Beyond housing, there's always a threat to dismantle, shut down, or eliminate intermediate care facilities for the developmentally disabled. Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act, and many people call it specialized waiver or sub-minimum wage. facility-based day employment and recreational services, and even provider-owned business enterprises, there's always a threat to shut these options down. And so if these are all eliminated, then what's the realistic, practical, sustainable option, that we can turn to? And what are we going to do about this? We really need to demand equal rights for people with disabilities. We must demand that Congress amend the 2010 Frank Melville Investment Act and remove the 25% limit on HUD Section 811 funding, which has only created unnecessary barrier and really stopped the growth of disability housing. And we need to demand the same for state and local government programs that fund housing. And any limit on IDD housing is a violation of Fair Housing and Americans with Disabilities Act. And we really need to educate the bureaucrats that this is really harming our population, not helping. And we also have to speak up and say that physical integration is not social integration. Everyone talks about this integration. I know so many people that are in physically integrated setting that are socially isolated all day. And this was not the purpose of the Olmstead Act. This was not the purpose of Fair Housing and Americans with Disabilities Act. And we need to stop discriminating against disability-specific and site-based settings and services, because people have a right to live, work, and associate with others with IDD, just like you and me. And individuals with disabilities and families, we really need to speak up, and we need to show up and take a stand. And I know it's really hard. We face barriers every day, and it's really hard to make that extra, half a day time to show up in Capitol Hill and make a phone call and have another fight and battle every single day. But we really need to speak up, because if you don't speak up, no one's going to speak up for you. And at a practical level, I think we need to come together and create IDD resources together. And, creating resources requires capital. And I see this with non-for-profits and lots of family groups always trying to raise money every year to break even and to keep the operation going, to keep the doors open. But it's really not sustainable. So what can we do to create long-term resources? And I think we really should invest in some kind of specialized housing development entity, and also financing entities such as community development financial institution that can go out and raise money from traditional banking institutions to fund a lot of these non-for-profit community development enterprises and projects. And we also need to think about investing in our own social enterprises and really think about life planning. Should we think about IDD specific fiduciary services and maybe even pool trust? Those are all these ideas that we would like to entertain and talk about. Right now, I go out to the fiduciary world and meet so many fiduciaries that have no clue how to serve people with IDD. And even there are very few IDD pool trust, but many of these organizations, while they mean well, a lot of the care management side pretty much, lacks the expertise and knowledge that we need to, properly serve individuals with IDD. And it's really a good time for us to come together and try to figure out, how do we create these resources so that when all of us are gone, all these enterprises and institutions will continue to successfully serve our loved ones. So with that, I will invite you to contact me, and let's keep talking about this. And this is my email address, and you can connect with me by email, or you can visit our website and attend our periodic webinars that we like to host from time to time. So with that, I'll open up for questions.
All right, thank you. Everybody on chat, I just took a look and it looks like a lot of you have been chatting just to hosts and panelists. So continue to use chat, but make sure you have it, assuming you want to be addressing everybody. Change that little blue bar to say everyone instead of hosts and panelists. Feel free to repost what you already posted because there are so many great comments, but they're only being seen by us, which is
Jill, I can't turn my
unfair.
camera back on. Do you have to do it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
There we go. We want to see you, Jackie.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go into some questions. I have so many, myself, but let's start here. A comment: it appears the state is saying to you, the parents, that your children, adults, are not worthy of the same life as a typical child, young adult. How dare they? I think that inherent in all of these restrictions is a complete contempt for our children who have severe autism or who have similar disabilities with severe behaviors. If they didn't have contempt for them, they wouldn't be imposing these restrictions that seem to be serving their own sense of what optics, we should have on them. For example, they don't like the idea of having, let's say 20 people with severe disabilities together. Well, they have no problem with 20 seniors together, right? There's something about the look and feel, right, of our children that rubs them the wrong way, that scares them, that they don't like. So I think there's an inherent discriminatory animus behind all of these restrictions that Ashley talked about. And we haven't really examined that at all, but I think that that's a big piece of it. The other big piece of it is, of course, financial. They want to enact roadblock after roadblock after roadblock to disincentivize investment to serve this population because they're concerned about long-term costs. Well, hello, the long-term costs are there no matter what setting they're in. They're going to cost a lot, whether they're here, whether they're there, whether they're there, or whether they're there. The costs are going to be not so different, right? But I think they feel like they're holding back. They're like the dam, right, against this big body of water that's just going to break and flood, by imposing all of these insane restrictions. And all it does is, as you said, it makes people miserable. It's just torment, right, for these families who are just looking for essential services for their kids. That's my 2 cents on that comment. I'll move on. Would you say these constraints in Pennsylvania are representative across the country, or is there a lot of variation, Ashley?
Can you repeat that?
Yes. Would you say these constraints in Pennsylvania are representative across the country, or is there a lot of variation?
There's a lot of variation. Pennsylvania is the worst, and Governor Shapiro is not willing to do anything about it. So I'm not really sure if legislators could have any influence on that either, because there is a state regulation that does not allow all these restrictions, these type of models. The summary that I have is actually a state regulation, so it's not a misinterpretation of the settings rule. If it's just a misinterpretation of the settings rule, then it's actually an easier fix than what Pennsylvania has. And the governor is not willing to do anything about it. And he has pretty much emboldened the current director of ODP. So that's really unfortunate. And the secretary is not willing to do anything about it either.
I'm afraid that's what's happening in New York.
New York is a little bit different. I think New York is
Current
actually,
climate, though, is not favorable.
well, Pathfinder Village in a rural setting is an intentional community, and they're very much supported by the state of New York, and they are, they're continuing to expand, and they're not dealing with the obstacles that Pennsylvania is dealing with. Pennsylvania doesn't allow any of that.
That I understand.
And Pathfinder Village is 100% IDD. 100%. So I don't, I think ODP OPWDD is New York, right? ODP is.
Yes, OPWDD is New
Yeah,
York.
OPWDD.
You're getting all
I
your
think
O's mixed up.
OPWDD can, my issue with OPWDD in New York was their own housing subsidies that their criteria might be a little bit more restrictive, but when it comes to the settings rule, I don't think it's interpreting more restrictive than the federal settings rule. But
Well-
locally, it's implemented in different ways, and I think there is a way to address that issue. And but Pennsylvania, the structure in place is already working against everyone.
Right.
Okay. I have some other questions about that, but I'll save them. All right, about 14C, Maureen says they will be eliminated. 14C is phasing out. What say you?
14C is not phasing out at this point, but I think not at the.
Can you tell
congressional-
people what that is? Because
So-
not everybody knows.
The Fair Labor Standards Act allows individuals with disabilities to participate in employment at a specialized wage. And in some cases, it's used to help hire individuals with severe disabilities, significant disabilities, who may not be able to fully participate in integrated community employment. With that being said, most of the programs are facilitated by non-for-profits. Have there been some issues and exploitation? Yes, but that's the case in everything in this world. And some people believe that people with disabilities should be paid at the minimum wage, or and I'm all about if the individual can earn minimum wage or more, I support that. But there are individuals that are not able to participate in integrated employment, and they cannot work or be as productive, to earn the minimum wage. Another thing about this type of program is that many of these non-for-profits, when they offer programs like this, they hire a lot of people to support the individual to be able to participate in this type of employment. So it costs money to create jobs for individuals with significant disabilities. So the sub-minimum wage kind of offsets that cost. So by taking away this opportunity for people to participate in this, basically I've seen individuals just staying home all day with
Well, I
nothing to
think
do.
that's the
And they're-
point of this,
And
is
yeah,
discrimination
get-
against people
exactly.
with complex needs, right?
So these individuals, I would see them at home and they continue to decline, and to a point where I can't even recognize them anymore. And they're depressed, they're isolated, their parents don't know what to do. There's no job that's willing to hire them.
Right.
At least not for, more than a few weeks or a couple of months, and then
Right.
it doesn't work out. So
That's the
constantly-
reality.
Yeah,
That's
that
the
is
reality of
reality.
shutting down the sheltered workshops.
Yeah.
That's what,
So for me, I will continue to support 14C until it goes away. At the federal level, 14C is still standing. At the state level, though, more and more states are starting to
Pushing
pass
back.
legislation to shut down sub-minimum wage. And it is what it is, people who actually say, well, 14C should shut down and they will be eliminated and need to be phased out and all that. They have no skin in the game, because you have no kid that ends up coming home with nothing to do.
Right.
So shame on you guys if you guys are supporting that. I'm sorry. I just hate that people think, oh yeah, 14C is really bad for these individuals. No, it's not. It's used as a tool. There are people that participate in 14C that also actually go out and participate in other type of community integrated employment, but not a lot of people can have like 20 hours of work.
My son can't. I
Yeah.
mean, Joe
So you
goes to
work, like,
Columbia and
2
can just
hours a
about get
week.
through an hour.
Yeah, you work
Right.
2 hours a week.
Yep.
And then what do you do for the rest of the week?
Exactly.
what do? You just, and people are like, oh, they go bowling and go watch a movie and go to a mall.
Walk around the mall.
Really?
Mhm.
That is so insulting. I'm sorry, like that is just so insulting. So yeah, don't even get me started with that. I mean, I hate going to malls, and I don't want to go see a movie every single day. There's nothing to watch every single day. So no, it's not right.
No, it seems completely immoral, actually, to remove like one of the very, very few things that creates engagement and skill building and community and purpose, to strip that away for what? And replace it with nothing,
Nothing.
know?
That's the
Yeah,
real kicker,
yeah, it's disgusting.
And the
Um,
worst part is because we know better than you do about
Yeah.
what's good for you and your kids.
Right, right.
Mm.
Exactly. I mean, what's person-centered about this? Person-centered except for the thing that you actually want and the thing that will actually work for you. Person-centered because I say it's good. I mean, person-centered, well, it's such a crock. They don't
My
really mean
husband
it.
says self-direction is the greatest misnomer there is because all they do is tell you what to do.
Everything you can't do. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. We are being tormented. Okay, so many questions. So we're on for a little while longer till 5:15, at least specific time. So there's plenty of time to go through questions and hopefully mine as well. What is being done to change the 2010 Frank Melville Investment Act and change the violations to the American Housing with Disabilities Act? Is there a movement? Ashley?
Wow.
Not yet, because to be honest, the HUD 811 funding was not really well funded to begin with. So basically, we just avoided going after that funding. So Senator Menendez is the guy who championed that bill in 2010. And as you guys all know, he's always under some kind of criminal investigation or indictment. And nobody from his office was there at that time when the bill was passed. And nobody wants to touch it because they think that if they touch that, then all of a sudden they're going to come off as supporting institutions. So we haven't found any congressional champion that's willing to touch that thing. And if you guys have a champion that is willing to do it, I welcome you to contact me. Basically, Frank Melville Investment Act authorized or it reformed and modernized HUD Section 811 and basically added that 25% limit. And my understanding was that the ARC and NAMI were behind that move, and they're the one that added that 25%. So we need a congressional champion.
Who was
Unfortunately,
behind it?
the ARC
The
and
ARC?
the ARC and NAMI, yeah, were
Uh,
behind
Yeah,
that
and now you realize
counterintuitive.
like, housing
for
for
integration.
people with mental illness and drug addiction, they are unfettered in terms of how many people, they can house. There's no restriction. You were talking about like the golf, the senior communities, or the foster care community, Ashley. You can also look at housing developments, at least here in California, where we have a big homeless, mentally ill, drug addiction problems. They're unfettered in terms of how many people, they can house. There are no restrictions. But on the IDD, that's a whole other story. They're like, oh no, we can't fund that.
Yeah,
Can't do
right
that.
now
It's
the
obviously discriminatory.
yeah, so most of the new affordable housing development that's opening up for application, when you actually look at the funding sources of all, it's a lot of the funding is coming from homeless housing funding, right? So basically, if you're not homeless, you can't even apply for affordable housing anymore, not for the new development. So where do we get our resources, right?
Right,
We need
right.
to come together and actually create access to capital.
Right.
The challenge that I see with a lot of family groups that come together to build housing is that, well, many of them don't understand the settings rule, and they don't understand the difference between housing subsidies versus service funding and the regulations that are related to each piece. And on top of all that, the underwriting process is not super straightforward like conventional lending. So the traditional banking, institutions are not going to want to touch that kind of project, especially not these days with high interest rates and money is hard to find.
Yep.
So, I thought about the minority communities, when immigrants came to America, what did they do? They came together and pulled their own resources and lent to themselves, to each other. And I feel like it's time for the IDD community to come together and do that. I mean, there are some community development financial institutions that specifically target disability resources, but we don't really have one specifically just for IDD. And I feel like, people within our community can understand this model better. We don't have to educate everybody about how all these things work. And we're not going to put up too many barriers the way our bureaucrats do. And in that way, we can turn to our traditional banking contacts that, financial institutions have to invest in the community development that's required by the Community Reinvestment Act. So maybe we need to come together and tell the traditional banks to invest in our community and meet the criteria that it's required by law. So why don't we do that ourselves instead of continuing to rely on ODP, DDS,
You're right.
housing
You're right.
community development agencies that don't understand anything
And the
about
banks
community.
got plenty of dough.
Yeah. And more, we have bank executives with children with autism. Let's knock on their doors and say, invest in our community and meet your CRA requirement, but
Well,
also help
they have
invest
to
in
see the cash flows, Ashley. They have to see the cash flows. So
yeah, we can see the cash flows. We don't have to do the permanent loan. We can do, bridge loans, 3 to 5 years, construction and all that. Once we get that going, individuals with disabilities are entitled to receive funding for services. Many of them are entitled. So the cash flows are there. We just need to structure it in a way that the underwriters can understand.
Well, part of I'm seeing the chat here. Part of the solution here, with this coalition that we've started is the first thing for so many people that have a profoundly autistic, profound high support, complex individual in their family is to go to your legislators to start and just say, hey, this is my family story. Because you'd be shocked at how many legislators have no idea that the agencies that are supposed to help us, they have no idea that they're torturing us. So just educating them, that's all of our responsibilities. So many people saying, what do you do first? Well, that's a good first start. And then organize, in your communities, in your own groups, like you're saying. And then, I'm hoping that Ashley's going to come speak to our group. And, we keep doing things like this, where this was some panel here. These people listening, these questions are terrific. These are all movers and shakers in their own communities. That's how it starts.
But let's move on so we can get through some more questions. Okay. Very good question. What kind of research is being presented as the foundation for these unjust policies? And what scope do you see for for-profit solutions? So there's 2 questions here. Really good question about the research foundation. Like, what do we justify, right? The closure of 14 Cs. What do we justify, like these Pennsylvania crazy, restrictions and limitations? What do we justify, any restriction that says, 6 beds or less, 4 beds or less, 16 beds or less,
Who says?
or whatever it might be, or you can't fund Jackie because she's not community integrated. And the answer is, from what I can tell, and somebody who reads a ton of research, there isn't any. There really isn't any research on point, especially on our population. There is old research that refers to other populations that I think can be used highly selectively and cherry picked. Like, for example, obviously a big Willowbrook setting, nobody wants that. Nobody's advocating for that. But they use that, right, to invoke, an opposition to anything that's considered congregate, which is crazy because I've been to some of these congregate settings and some of them are amazingly great. And any researcher would go in and say, oh my God, this is the most amazingly great thing I've ever seen in my life, right? But we don't have that research. And one thing that drives me absolutely nuts is the utter silence of our ivory tower academic community, whether they be, psychiatrists, sociologists, developmental pediatricians, other people in academia, researchers who see the problem, who see the immense need for housing, for services, for supports, for programs, and they're saying nothing. They
Well,
say
that's why
nothing.
Joey's working at
And
Columbia. They're seeing them now.
they're seeing them now, right? But it's and then there's also like this sensibility out there. I'm sorry to pontificate. That I think is driven by what I call the disability rights industrial complex, which is all about, integration. Everybody's going to be integrated. Everybody's going to be treated as if they're normal, and everybody's going to kind of become normal by virtue of their integration. And it's like, that's great for some portion of the disability population. I'm 100% for it. But they're completely oblivious and completely subverting the needs of people who have very complex and severe disabilities, for whom, integration is not readily available. For example, people like my son, who's 25 and nonverbal, and I think a lot like Jackie's son. So it's a good question. I don't have a great answer to it, except I do think that we need our research community to stand up, right? And do the work, the foundational work we need to do to show and prove that these options are important. And also we need the economists. Where are the economists who understand what's financially viable and what's not viable? Where are they on this? How come they're not speaking out about this? We are being forced upon us some paradigms that are completely unviable from an operational point of view. Okay.
Well, there's no research that shows that 25% limit leads to
There's
integration.
none.
And I don't think our policymakers are driven by data anyway. They're driven by ideology and the loudest voice. And so at certain point, I don't think logic works when it comes to advocacy. I think it's just the angry mama bears have to show up and just knock on their door and demand that we deserve equal rights to be able to associate ourselves with other people. So, I think we could invest in some disability legal fund. But
sort of what we
with
wanna
that
do.
money, we could focus on actually creating resources. And focus on something more practical rather than dealing with these ideologues. But the more and more communities get built, the more people actually get to see that all these communities are actually doing really well, and they're better serving the individuals more than some of the quote unquote integrated communities. And I think we need to just keep speaking up.
Let's go on. Are there certain states that are better than others for housing and understanding that we need all options for our adult kids? I wish people would realize that people get abused because there are bad people, not bad places. Places don't abuse people. People abuse people. I hope that makes sense. This makes me crazy because I do think some parents do not understand what they are saying. When they say shut down all state facilities, it scares me. We need all of it and more. Great comment. Any comments on the comment?
Yeah, Florida is actually a pretty good state, but there's no one solid state that stands out more than anybody else, because Florida, when it comes to housing, is good, but when it comes to services, it's not good, right? So Florida is really good with housing policy, where they actually allocate 5% of their total tax credits just for IDD housing. So it's so much easier to obtain tax credits to be able to build affordable housing for individuals with IDD, except that, those type of housing may not be so ideal for individuals with more severe challenges. And the services part does not really make up for the, for the housing. So, with housing. So, but in California, our housing is really expensive, and we do not have the separate allocation for tax credits. And it's really hard to go after tax credits, competing against homeless projects, because there are a lot of public funding money that goes into the homeless projects. And the more public money that goes into the project, the more competitive you become in getting the 9%. So that's difficult. But when it comes to services, even though we don't have as many as we would like, at least people are not put on the physical wait list, right? Like, as soon as you move to California, as soon as you are entitled or diagnosed and you're in the system, you are entitled to receive services. So that's really great. But then that we have 21 regional centers that basically create thousands and thousands of barriers. In addition to the state regulation, they create their own set of rules based on their own stupid ideology, and they discourage families. And for families to fight for one thing, they have to go through 1,000 steps just to fight them. And that's not right either.
Yeah, it's so, it seems like there's just such a void of common sense when it comes to, you know, people like us who are trying to help ourselves, and rather than helping us, they get in our way. It just, it's really to the point that you could lose your mind. But, you know, that's why we're organizing here in New York. You know, Jill has put this National Council for Severe Autism this is relatively new. We've all been suffering alone. I mean, just having this national platform to share this has been so liberating. This is the first step. We're getting there.
And I want to say something about that. The leading autism advocacy organizations have been completely silent on this issue. They have, or worse, silent or worse.
Or complicit.
Complicit. They basically tend to side with the disability rights industrial complex, and they don't stand up for the needs of people with severe autism. And that's why, you know, we came into being, because they were not helping. You know, when the whole settings rule came about, did they say anything?
Right.
Nothing. They could have quashed that thing in a second. But no. Okay. So how do we fix this? What about nationwide lawsuits? Asks Irene. I mean, I don't know if you want to say anything on that, Ashley.
Well, can I say something?
Yeah.
Something that's been kicked around by us. You know how we have IDEA, and, you know, under 21, if you can't find an appropriate school, at least you can sue and place. Well, you don't really have that over 21. There's nothing like that. There's no legislation where we can say, you know, this is a violation of ADA, this is a violation of something, and we're entitled to have a place to live. That you're not entitled to anything. You're not, you know.
So my idea is that if you have an idea to build housing, just build it. And then get denied. And then sue the crap out of them.
That's how I roll.
And then let that go all the way to whatever Supreme Court.
It's not, and then we can win in the week, but
and I actually don't think it's going to go all the way to a Supreme Court. I think at the local court, I think judges and attorneys actually would know that this is a case that they cannot win. The disability right, whatever ideologues cannot win, because you are discriminating. There was a case in the city of Springfield where a housing provider, a group home provider, built a licensed home and was told by the city that it was too close to another group home. And the provider sued the city of Springfield, and Springfield lost. And the United States also joined as a plaintiff to actually file a lawsuit to join the lawsuit, because if you cannot tell a neurotypical population, you know, that you guys are living too close to each other, you would never be able to say that to anybody who's Asian. My mother lives in an assisted living facility with 100 other Asian Americans, Korean more specifically, because she wants to speak Korean. She could eat Korean food. She has Korean caregivers
that they understand.
No one's going to be able to come to that facility and tell them, well, you have too many Koreans here. You have to move everybody out and mix them up with other population. I mean, these Korean ladies will just go after them, right? So you will never be able to do that. So I say, build it and get denied. I would love for you to get denied so we can actually pick up a fight, because at that point you'll have a standing.
I'm with you.
Okay.
Yeah. So
all right,
let's get out and build something.
The cusp. There's a lot of people on the cusp. I think they need to hear that.
Yeah.
Okay, so many questions, so I'm sorry, I'm going to barrel through. Does anyone have a better sense of the history of how we got to this point? Children with IDD used to be hidden and put away in institutions some, probably not all, didn't do a good job. I don't know what she means by that. I would like to have a better sense of how the onus ended up being on the person with IDD to fit somewhere out in the world. Might it in part be that this was a cheaper way to go rather than for the welfare of people locked up in institutions, i.e., yeah, the onus is on the family. Let's make it clear. It's not like there's this angel fairy godmother state coming in saying, let us create a beautiful future for your child. I mean, listen, if your kid doesn't have a good champion in you or somebody else, you know, the state is happy to write them off.
Nobody's coming to save us.
And yeah, does this have to do? Yes, of course it has to do with money. It does have to do with the welfare for our kids. You know, no one wants to budget more money. Already, you know, our IDD systems are already under huge stress because of the influx of autism cases. And they really, everybody is sort of ostriching their heads in the sand about how much money is going to cost to support these people over the long term. I don't have a better answer to that, but let's move on.
Joe,
As
can
a-
I say something
Yeah.
about what Jackie said about Mary Ogle? Yeah, Mary Ogle of New Leaf did it
Which is
by
Oklahoma.
yeah, which is in Oklahoma. It's they built a village for 60
Yeah.
individuals or something like that. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. Mary called me and I said, just keep going and see if you get denied. She did get denied a couple of months before the grand opening date.
That's right.
And we stepped in and helped, and we contacted CMS and we fought with them, and that's how a New Leaf got its approval. So yeah, build it and bring on the fight. Because if you don't do that, they're just gonna try to scare you as much as possible
Mhm.
and
You just
and
can't believe that.
intimidate.
You know, you just can't believe that. You think, because here in New York, OPWDD says, come to us, tell us what your plans are. So you do, and then they're like, oh, you can't do that. And then people get afraid. So we got to just push on through. I agree with you.
Yeah, everyone listen to my podcast with Mary Ogle, who's amazing, from Oklahoma, and hear the story of a new leaf. Just amazing. As a family member guardian of a severely autistic individual, what advice do you have for those of us who would like to affect change in the system but don't know where to start outside of just voting? Well, from NCSA's point of view, cold hard cash is always welcome because we have to pay the people who we have to hire to do policy work for us. And there's also a national grassroots network, very easy to find on our masthead. Sign up for that because we're going to be relying on the soldiers in the field, right, to be doing this sort of advocacy work over the long haul. Maureen posted something from the Washington Post. Lori, what is the name of the Menendez bill?
The
Oh,
Frank Melville
yeah, the
investment.
Melville Act. I'm an NJ, want to learn more. I think you'll probably have to Google it, but it was, as Ashley said, the bill that enacted that
Authorized funding for
25%.
its HUD
Yeah,
section
and
811.
that's Section 811. Jackie says,
Well, Menendez is under indictment, so it's not really useful to go back to his office. You just need to.
but I
Here's not
actually
always
already
the
said we
way.
need another legislative champion, right?
I
Yeah,
thought
anybody that
his
helps
previous
us.
indictment would finish his career, but it's not doing it. So maybe this one will. Yeah.
All right, I think this probably refers to Pennsylvania, but where does the idea of 4 people living together in a residence being the magic number come from? Many of our kids have lived well in camp and school settings with 6 to 8 individuals. Who are our judge and jury on this? Yeah, these are arbitrary numbers. Like, for example, in Pennsylvania, where does it come from? I think it comes from the disability rights community, right?
And by the way, there's no rule or state or federal regulation that says that no
Right.
unrelated,
Right.
you can't have like 3 or more than 4 unrelated people living together. That's
Well,
not.
how about those summer share houses when it's typical people?
Yeah.
There's 40 people and no one cares. You know, it's ridiculous. I mean, there's local ordinances, I guess, but it's
No, there isn't.
It's discrimination against our population. That's what it is. Unfounded.
Yeah, very much so. Okay, Joe, who's my new best friend, apparently says, as a clinical researcher who serves individuals with severe challenging behavior, how can I and my professional organizations better support you? 100%. I think the professional organizations have to get on board with the clients they serve. I mean, I talk to these people all the time, researchers in the field, clinicians in the field who all see the same thing and aren't saying anything. So I do think we really have to coordinate with these professional organizations to change the
Need to
narrative
stop
about this.
saying, yes, everybody should be employed. Yes, everybody needs to be
Right.
integrated. Yes, that, because
Right.
everybody toes the party line.
And why is it all on the parents? Right? It shouldn't be all on the parents. It should be on these people who are supposed to be leaders in the community, professional leaders, and people who have a lot of stature in the community. They should be helping us. So, Joe, feel free to reach out to us. info@ncsautism.org. Maureen keeps posting links, and I don't know what they are.
Articles, I've opened them all. She's
DOL.
terrific. She could
DOL
be a
drive.
panelist at a point on employment. She's
Okay,
terrific.
well, she knows. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maureen. Jennifer says, I heard New Jersey has been pretty successful with building and creating communities for people with autism. Is this true? Who wants to talk about New Jersey?
Well, actually, it's not about successful, but I think it's not as restrictive as it tried to be at the beginning. When the settings rule first came out, it actually interpreted the way Pennsylvania did by trying to implement like the 25% restrictions and all that. And they moved away from that. And I think New Jersey is kind of allowing more flexibility, just like everybody else. I don't think it's like successful. I don't think there's been a lot of success stories out of Jersey. It's just more like it's doing what it's supposed to do now. And I'm sorry, Olmstead is not an act. Olmstead is a Supreme Court Olmstead decision. So it's not about being reconsidered. Olmstead is completely fine. It's the bureaucrats that are completely misinterpreting Olmstead.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right.
Okay, well, we are past our time. There's so many good comments in the chat. Again, a lot of them sent to us instead of everyone. Benjamin's Hope in Michigan. We should have one in every country. I've heard such good things about that. And that's all Medicaid funded. We are expensive. Well, it is what it is. If we can make it more efficient, we certainly can and should.
That's the reason why it's important to do intentional communities, because you do achieve economies of scale.
Economies of scale, right?
When the cost of running Benjamin's Hope per person is not as expensive as running one, I've looked at some of the group home budget per person every year versus what, Benjamin's Hope gets paid per person. And, you definitely benefit from the economies of scale by having a campus setting.
A lot of comments about the ACL, which is the Federal Administration on Community Living. The ACL has subcontracted with self-advocacy groups to implement policy. This is a big problem. These federally funded advocacy organizations are insider organizations that are very exclusive, and they very deliberately exclude people from our communities. And so you get this self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Because all this federal money is going to these groups and to these advocates that have a narrow view of what policy and what programs should look like. And then they keep funding each other. They keep funding themselves ad nauseum. And it becomes hard for us because they are the big, loudest voice in any room, right? And we are not. It's a big problem. ACL is at the center of the disability industrial complex. Interesting comments. I wish Advancing States had a letter where they brought up a revision of Section 504 and how a Jewish community center for seniors would be considered isolating. It's getting ridiculous.
Yeah, try to go after the senior community and see where you end up. Please do that. Please
Yeah.
do that. I would love
We
to see
need-
what happens.
Well, the seniors vote and my kids don't vote.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
and
but
the
you know
senior
what?
community, they lobby like crazy,
But
so
every time
yeah, try
somebody
to go
says
after
that
the
to me,
seniors.
I said, you know, Joe may not vote, but he's got a big family, he's got a big staff, and we all vote. So don't
Mhm.
take us lightly. We need an AARP type group for us, for people with IDD and our families.
Yeah.
We need a pack.
But the issue is that a lot of autism, the autism community is also very divided too,
It's
right?
factious, there's
There
no
are
doubt.
families that are,
Yep.
that do not agree with our position. I mean, people hate me for supporting 14C.
And the self-advocates hate us. There's no
Yeah.
two ways about it. Yep.
Yeah, someone brings up the direct care crisis. Yes, I mean, of course, that's huge. We don't have enough money to pay good staff for our people, and that is, of course, an
Well,
elephant in
that's
the
why
room.
self-direction is so successful, though, because we're able to pay people a much higher wage than the minimum wage from the budget. That's, and that's causing a ruckus here in New York because the traditional voluntary agencies are like, well, we can't pay that. I'm like, well, you kind of could. You just don't want to.
Well,
Get reimbursed.
I will push back on that, Jackie. I mean, a lot of these organizations, they do have a pretty heavy overhead.
Yeah,
And
but
I think the problem with
Ashley,
a lot of the states is that when they say self-directed, they actually say that families need to, or individuals have to, hire from non-voluntary organizations. And what happens is that, that only applies to families who can coordinate those type of things. What if the parents are no longer around, things like that? So I think it's a pretty complicated situation, because like in Oklahoma and other states, they do say self-directed funds can only be between families and the workers and no agency involved.
that would be so much easier for us. I'd like to be able to be in that model, to find the flaws, because that's the problem we have here, is the intermediary. There's too many levels between the money going to who it goes to. There's too many people taking a piece of the
Yes.
action and making decisions, which shouldn't be. And what I meant about the provider agencies is they've been around a long time. They're very property heavy. They own a lot of properties. They own all those group homes. They could, mortgage them. They could do things. They could be a little creative to pay their people. They seem to be able to pay the executives. They should be able to pay the people who work directly with the people. Just saying.
Okay, on that note, we're past our time. Thank you so much. Somebody asks about recording. We will have a recording up probably this evening on that same webinar page where you registered. So ncsautism.org, click on webinars. It'll be on that page. I'll also probably have it on the homepage as well. And all of these come from our YouTube channel. This will also be on our podcast, which is called Autism Confidential. And that should be up on Monday, I believe. So with that, I thank you, Jackie. I thank you, Ashley, for everything you do in the world and for bringing your insights, experience, and wisdom to our audience. This is obviously not the last time that we will be discussing this topic, but we will keep moving forward for rational policy that will actually help our disabled children. So thank you so much. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for being here.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.